Hi there. Welcome to the End Times Guy podcast. Great to have you with me today. Friday morning, September 13th. Yeah, September 13th. On my way into Kamloops, which is my home. I've got a load of steel there to deliver, and then I will reload so that over the weekend I can relax and leave on Sunday with a load, head out on Sunday and deliver Monday morning. I like to do that to maximize my week. I'm allowed 70 hours and I can cover that in roughly 5.5 days. So that gives me a day and a half at home with my daughters, which I really enjoy. You know, the older one is 19, the younger one is 17, and we are best friends. We live as if in covenant, the covenant of Christ among us. There isn't, this is mine and that's yours. We're all willing to pitch in and help out. My younger daughter works part-time and has an income that I give her for looking after the house and cooking the dinners. And I'll tell you what, when we're out shopping, she's always willing with her meager income to pitch in and pay for things. And that's just the nature of God's children, is it's in them to give. It's in their heart to want to give. Whereas in the world, we were always holding back and hoping someone else would step up and pay, and that would give us more for ourselves. We're always looking out for ourselves, but living in Christ, we're different. We're always looking for the good of others, looking to give instead of to take. And it's wonderful to live in covenant like that. You know that you're deeply loved, and they know that they're deeply loved. There is no question that no matter what the situation, they would have my back. They would do everything in their power to help me, and they know the same is true of me. And it's my hope and prayer that your family is like that there is a security, a knowledge that they will always do their best to look after you, and you will do the same for them. And anything less than that comes from the world. If your family situation isn't that sweet, then it's only because of worldly influences. And unfortunately, when I call them young adults, when a teenager wants to rebel and be angry and hostile, frankly, they're an adult and they're making their own decisions. You see, I don't believe in teenager at all. It's a social construct that came along in, I believe, the 1920s. They wanted to give young adults more time to enjoy their youth. It was a horrible, horrible experiment, and look at what it's done. In my mind, there's no such thing as a teenager. And all around the world for thousands of years, puberty was an indicator that childhood was over and adulthood was beginning. And at the age of 14, it was time to grow up and be an adult and do adult things and take adult responsibility. At the age of 16, I told both my daughters that in my mind, you're adults. You're free to do whatever you please. If you want to party, if you want to do drugs, if you want to get pregnant, it's your choice. I'm not going to argue with you. If you want to dress, inappropriately to garner attention, it's your life. But remember, it's your life, and the decisions you make, you're going to have to live with. It's not my life, it's yours. And by handing them their lives like that, lo and behold, they were careful. They understood that it was their life, not mine. And they didn't want to wreck it. So they're taking care of their life. They're making wise decisions. And guess who they're coming to when they're not sure? Yeah, they come to me and ask, well, what should I do about this? You see, you don't need to be at war with your young adults. You don't need to have a war and rebellion and all that foolishness. It's unnatural for us to try and retain control over a young adult, someone who in their heart knows they should be an adult. They should be making their own decisions. What's wrong with them making their own decisions? If they were raised by a Christian family, they know wrong and right. And if it's their life and their decisions, they're going to have to live with, they're going to have to fix their mistakes, they're going to have to clean up the mess, then they're going to have responsibility. They're going to be careful about what they do with their lives. So I don't mean to lecture on parenting. I just see so many in the Christian community trusting in the world and doing things that the world says we should do. And it's a mistake. It's a huge mistake. My child is acting out here. Let's get them some drugs. Let's allow them some transgender training courses. You know, the world is blind. The world is mad and going in a completely confounding direction. We can't trust the world with our children. Anyways, I started this podcast today because I want to have a podcast that provides you with a toolkit for living a healthy, vibrant Christian life in the end times, which is no easy thing. You see, every time I look at the news, it breeds frustration. The things that are going on in the world, the knee-jerk reaction is disgust, reproach, anger, confusion. It's just mad out there. This transgender we have in Langley, what's her name? His real name is Jonathan, but he calls himself Jessica. And I think he's just enjoying the attention. I don't think he honestly, well, I don't know. I don't know the guy. But he certainly is getting the attention that he's wanted all his life. You see, he's an obese white male. And an obese white male in our society is written off immediately as invisible, almost like a homeless person. No one is really interested. They're the bottom of the gene pool. The worst thing you can be in this culture is an obese white male. It's bad enough being a white male. That makes you a pariah. But an obese white male is, oh my goodness. So he grew up having no attention whatsoever. And now his stunts are garnering him the attention. You see, God engineered us to live in community with one another. God's plan is that we live as tribes, ruled by our loved ones, are governed by our grandparents, and that we would be surrounded by aunts and uncles, cousins, nephews, nieces, brothers and sisters, so that everyone around us knows us and cares about us. That's the way we were designed to live. And our natural desire to be surrounded by people who care about us hasn't gone away. But we find ourselves living in a society that doesn't care the least about us. We live in a society that trains us to be at war with our parents. Most families today are dysfunctional and at war with one another. It's absolutely terrible. So you have millions upon millions of very lonely people who feel like nobody cares that they live or die. And this young man finally has the attention that he so desperately desires. And it comes through his outlandish activities on Twitter and Facebook, going to a Brazilian wax place and being offended they won't wax his testicles, going to the pool and tweeting that, oh, I forgot my tampons, I can't go swimming. outlandish nonsense that drives social media insane. And social media is a mindless pit where people hop from one outrageous thing to another, and this young man is giving them one more piece of information they can get excited about. The latest was he's selling his used underwear online. I believe panties are going at $60. I I really have to cry when I hear that. And if anyone buys it, I would give their name to the local authorities. It's just horrific. But you know, what was I talking about? Okay, I was talking about the toolkit to strengthen us in the end times. And, you know, we're living in radically depraved times where this confused, mentally ill young man is uh, feeling more loved than ever before in his life. Finally, people know his name. And that's the society that is fostering this sickness. We live in a society where a mentally ill man who raped a 7-year-old boy went to prison, and, you know, for his crimes, he should live a wretched, lonely, painful existence as a slave to society, working 12 hours a day to repay what he has done. Prisons, of course, don't do that. These criminals aren't repaying anything. They're addicted to drugs. They're lounging around. They're becoming better criminals. Our criminal justice system is a complete failure. And like everything else in society, it's so blind and inadequate to truth and justice. But this rapist is now receiving his transgender medical attention. So the hormone therapies, the reassignment surgeries, and all the rest of the hundreds of thousands of dollars it will require is now being paid by the taxpayers. And this is once again an obese, I don't believe he's a white male. I believe he is olive skinned. I'm not sure what particular, not that it really matters, but it's just another obese male who, you know, women didn't flock to him, didn't find him attractive, and that played some sort of game in his head. He felt that women should be drawn to him. Now, I was a horribly, horribly skinny little guy at the age of, 16, 17, 18. Women weren't drawn to me at all. But instead of looking at them and, blaming them and hating them and wanting to be like them, and, this is mental illness when you set your mind on the problem being them and not looking at yourself. What's wrong with yourself? Well, lose some weight. I had to work in the gym like a dog, lifting steel and punishing myself. And you know what? Just killing myself in the gym. I was only able to put on a few pounds a year. Later on, I met up with a good workout partner and I was putting on 10 pounds a year. And I went from 130 to a natural healthy weight of 180 and looking really physically fit. And surprise, surprise, I got a lot of attention from women. You see, instead of looking at themselves and what's wrong with themselves, they're trying to look outside and see how it's everyone else's fault. And now the transgender thing is just one more avenue of escape from realizing that they have a problem. And, instead of working on yourself to make yourself a better person, people are now looking to pills and to it's an instant society. We will all want easy, instant answers. And sometimes the problems within ourselves require sacrifice and suffering. But people don't want to hear about that. People don't want to pay a price anymore. They want the easy answer. So, anyways, moving on, we are living in a narcissistic, wicked society. And how do we stand strong in that society? This is not an easy thing to do. I don't care what work you have. You're running into frustrations throughout your day, as I do. And those frustrations have an effect. We're not immune to the society around us. We're not anesthetized so that we aren't impacted by the wickedness and depravity around us. People will use us. People will treat us like a doormat. And the knee-jerk reaction is to feel frustration. So what do we do? How do we maintain joy and peace and harmony and love and our, when we're frustrated and angry, that's pulling us from the presence of God. It's creating a separation within us. And guilt, if we lash out at someone, there's undoubtedly going to be some guilt, which is right. We should feel guilty if we're lashing out at another person. So how do we cope? How do we walk through this world without being overcome by it? Well, here's some tools for your benefit to be strong. First of all, devotions, it really is you get what you give. If you hope that reading a chapter at bedtime is enough, I'm sorry, it's nowhere near enough. It is in the presence of Christ that we are fed. You see, we have to give grace out all day long. That's what love is. Love is giving grace. It's giving forgiveness. It's giving patience. It's giving mercy where it's not deserved. We're called on to give all day long. This person did this to me. Okay, I've got to give them grace. Well, you're not an endless supply of grace. In yourself, you have a measure of grace. And what happens when you run out? That's usually when you go off like a bomb. So we need to keep going back to Christ. He is the bread of life. And we need to go into his presence. When we're in his presence, we're eating that bread of grace and being replenished and being renewed. Where did Jesus go to be replenished? He went alone in the mountains. And he would be up there all night. He needed an abundance of grace because he was surrounded by people all wanting something from him. He was living in we don't know what need is. We have doctors and we have Walmart. We don't even know what need is. But Jesus was surrounded with very deep need. So he went to the mountains. He went to be alone with his Father. And he would spend the night in his Father's presence, replenishing his supply of grace. Because I'll tell you what, he needed an armory of grace to be able to get through his days. He was surrounded by cripples, by people with leprosy, people who were demon possessed, people who hated him, who despised him, and were always trying to trip him and cause him to stumble. He was surrounded with people who claimed to love him, but were confused and self-centered. If you don't believe me, look at the disciples arguing over who would be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus needed an armory of grace to survive his day, and he went before God to replenish that grace. And that's where we can find grace for ourselves. If you're running low and it's starting to build up within you, you're tired of getting stepped on and mistreated, you need some place to go and pray and seek the presence of the Lord to replenish your supply of grace. Where sin is increased, grace abounds more and more. That's God's promise to us. Where sin is increased, grace abounds all the more. And I want us to take hold of that. Sin is increased on the earth all around us, but guess what? Grace has abounded more and more. So go and feed. When you're empty, go and feed in the presence of the Lord. Take your empty heart to him. God is not stingy, okay? God gives abundantly all that you need. Go into his presence, and here are some of the different things you can do in his presence, all of which supplies with grace. God is like visiting grandma. You never leave empty. You leave stuffed. So go to grandma. Go and visit with God, and he won't let you go away empty. So you go to God in prayer. Open up your heart and speak the words from your heart, not your mind. Don't pray from the wisdom of man or your understanding, because God wants to hear what's in your heart. He's not listening to English words proceeding from your mind. He's listening to the cry of your heart. So open up your heart. Sometimes it helps for me to lift my hands up, to tilt my head back, to remind myself to be in a posture of opening up my heart and just pouring out what's in it. Tell God your frustration. Tell God your weakness. He doesn't expect you to be Superman or Superwoman. He expects you to be honest. And man, a real sincere prayer from the heart before God accomplishes much. It accomplishes a great deal. Another thing that you can get into in the presence of God is thanksgiving. Just begin to thank God. And you can do this while you're standing at the till, while you're seated with a customer. You can do this in your mind as long as it's coming from the heart. Begin to thank God in your heart for all he has given to you. And this will replenish you. This will strengthen you. Another thing is, when you read the scriptures, do not read a chapter with duty and look forward to it being over. This heart will prevent you from receiving the bread of the word. You need to pick it up because you desire what is inside of it. Don't put a limit or a minimum on how much you're going to read. Go into the word of God seeking the word, seeking the bread. You may only read 2 verses, or you may read a whole book. But when you're reading because you want the word, instead of a sense of duty, I'll get through this chapter for God, isn't going to give you anything. But Lord, I want your word inside of me. I want your word to perform its work in me. It's going to be a profound difference. It's going to bless your life and strengthen you. And finally, one of the key elements in keeping you strong and healthy in these end times is to open up your life and allow the Lord to minister through you. You see, ministry doesn't have to be a diploma and a pulpit. Ministry doesn't have to be a commission to the missionary field, although those things are wonderful. Ministries are all around us every day, whether it be a tent city. My daughters are knitting little toques that go to the hospital for the newborns, and they are so deeply appreciated. And you know what? I have to keep reminding my daughters that this is a ministry. They love doing it, but it is a ministry. Giving your love away is a ministry, no matter what form it takes. Handing out a few dollars to a homeless person. I always carry stuff in my vehicle in the wintertime, especially blankets and things like that, to give away if I see someone in need. And I saw another woman in my community do this. She stopped, popped her trunk, and brought a blanket to a homeless man. I have no idea who that woman was. I don't know her name, but I'll tell you what, she's my sister. God bless every one of my brothers and sisters whose eyes are open for all these wonderful ministry opportunities that surround us. And I tell you what, when you're engaged in these ministries, you won't be weak. You won't be stumbling in darkness. So I want this podcast to encourage you to be strong in these end times. These are terrible times to live in. We're surrounded by a lot of pressure, a lot of things that are pulling us down, a lot of news that is just cutting our hearts. I tell you, I can't watch too much of the news because it just fills me with disgust, but we can't allow disgust in our hearts. The apostle says, whatever is good, whatever is lovely, whatever is pleasing, on these things dwell. Set your minds on good things so that good things fill your heart. And out of the overflow of your heart, the mouth speaks. And if you have an overflow of good things in your heart, then your mouth is saying good things. And that's exactly what we need in these end times, is that when the world around us is getting more caustic, more abrasive, more angry and hostile, out of our mouths is coming, but yeah, it's still a sunny, beautiful day out today. And I'm so happy to have this job. You know, we're able to pay our bills and buy groceries, and yeah, we are different. The smell of life is upon us. God bless you richly today. Take care.